to this new panel on mapping borders and making infantile borders. We have 4 speakers today, so we'll have to be really tight on timekeeping. We'll kick off with a presentation by Catherine Gibson. Catherine is pursuing a PhD in History and Civilization at the European University Institute. Her research concentrates on the northwestern part of the Russian Empire in the 19th and 20th centuries, and the independent states of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Belarus. She's interested in language and nationalism, ethno-linguistic minorities, as well as borders and borderlands in East Central Europe and Russia. She has a forthcoming book, Borderlands Between History and Memory, to be published by Tartu University. And today she will be presenting a paper on mapping the phantom borders of the northern Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth between 1914 and 1920.
So thank you to the organisers for inviting me to come and share this part of my PhD project with you today. And I would just like to say as well, thank you to the European Centre in Nautanen who funded this portion of research. And I'm going to be also showing a lot of different maps today. And if you're interested in any of the maps that I show on my slides today, I actually upload all the maps that I use in my research onto this website. So for those of you with a kind of map fetish like me, you can check them all out at your leisure there. So I'd like to start with a little anecdote about when I was in Warsaw in the archives this summer. And I was looking at a map by famous Polish cartographer Jan Roma, his Geographical Statistical Atlas of Poland, which is regarded in Poland as one of the most important cartographical works from the early 20th century. The atlas was published in 2 editions, in 1916 and in 1921, and in multiple languages. And this atlas formed the basis of material used by the Polish delegation at the Paris Peace Conference. Upon closer examination, however, I noticed some striking differences between the 2 editions. Not least that whereas in the 1916 edition, Roma depicted the Polish ethnographic territory as stretching from Vilna, today's Vilnius, up to Dienaburg and even further northwards. However, in the 1921 edition, the territory defined as ethnographically Polish had significantly contracted and stopped south of the river Dwina. Where did all the Poles go? The simple answer to this question was that Roma had changed the threshold for defining Polishness. Whereas on the 1916 map, he shaded the interval between 5 and 20% Polish in yellow. On the 1921 map, he only showed those territories inhabited by a majority, that is 50% or above of Poles. However, these technical differences also reflect a much larger shift which occurred between the years during World War I and the aftermath of the war, regarding the changing parameters for defining the borders and internal composition of Poland and Poles. How and why did definitions of Polishness change during this period? And, specifically related to the theme of this conference, what was the relationship between ideas about a new Polish state and the legacies of the borders of the former Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth? A little bit of background. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was a dualistic state which existed as a union of the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania between the 16th and 18th centuries. At the very northeastern reach of this Commonwealth was a small vassal known as Polish Inflanty. It was known as Polish Inflanty to distinguish it from the Swedish Inflanty, which was the part of former Livonia which was occupied by Sweden after the Northern War. And although this northern periphery was only ever loosely connected to the Commonwealth in terms of administration and judicial terms, the 2 centuries of Polish-Lithuanian cultural and political influence left strong imprints in the region. Most notably, Catholicism remained firmly entrenched, whereas the Counter-Reformation swept through the other territories of former Livonia, and this phantom border can be seen today, whereas this region remains Catholic, whereas the other territories of Latvia and Estonia are predominantly Protestant. The links with the Commonwealth also influenced the so-called Latgalian speech in this region, which is regarded by some as a separate language, because it is heavily influenced with many different words from Polish and Belarusian, which distinguishes it from standard Latvian. And also, many Polish-Lithuanian noble families settled in the region during this period, and if you travel there today, you can still see their kind of manor houses which are dotted all over the region. The Commonwealth, as Bernard has already explained this morning, was split at the end of the 18th century in three partitions, which divided the territory between the Russian Empire, the Kingdom of Prussia, and the Habsburg-Austrian Empire. Polish Livonia was transferred into the Russian Empire during the first partition in 1772 and became part of Vitebsk province. Throughout the 19th century, in Polish intellectual memory of the Commonwealth, Polish Livonia slipped out and it was forgotten. I'm not going to talk too much about this because the Polish historian Krzysztof Zapas has written a really excellent book about this topic. But suffice to say that whereas Polish Romanticism was bound up in a strong sense of nostalgia for these lost territories, or the Kresy, which was incorporated into the Russian Empire, the former territories of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Polish Livonia was forgotten. And on maps of the former territories of the Commonwealth produced in the 19th century, Polish Livonia is absent. It's not included in the territories defined as being part of Poland. However, this changed at the beginning of the 20th century. The shifting borders brought about by World War I provided Polish cartographers with new opportunities for imagining what a future Poland should look like. The stabilized eastern front during the war ran directly through the northeastern borderlands of the former Commonwealth, running from Riga down to Daugavpils and then southwards. And then it was during this period that Polish Livonia suddenly started appearing again on Polish maps, as cartographers and geographers sought to reincorporate this seemingly peripheral region of the former Commonwealth from the perspective of Warsaw, far to the south, into their visions of a new Polish state. The phantom borders of the Commonwealth were deliberately resurrected and conjured up during this period to legitimize maximalist territorial claims. Roma, whose maps I open my presentation with, played a pivotal role in popularizing ideas about a Polish sphere of influence, which reclaimed former Polish Lithuania as part of the Polish territory. Roma moved away from the idea of Poland as a bordered space determined by geographical and topographical elements, which had previously in the 19th century meant that the borders of Polishness had stopped at the river Dwina, to focusing more on the internal composition of Poland and its inhabitants. His understanding of what it meant to be Polish was grounded in the concept which was popular during the time of the Commonwealth of Gentes Lituanis or Rutenus Natione Polonius, which separated familial or ethnic origins from national or civic identification with the Polish-Lithuanian state. These ideas can be clearly seen on the base map of Roma's atlas, which followed the pre-partition borders of the Commonwealth. These borders assumed a kind of mythical status, and were used to present a unified picture of demographic patterns in the region 150 years later. In order to make his case for a sphere of Polish interests, Roma produced a map which displayed population density of Poles in various territories of the former Commonwealth, in shaded, colour-coded intervals of 25, 50, and 75%. He also added two further categories of 1 to 5% and less than 1%. And the result was that the map conveys the impression that the whole territory of the former Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was Polish to a degree. Roma also included a much more detailed map of the former Grand Duchy of Lithuania. titled this ostensibly as an ethnographic map, he actually mapped the distribution of properties owned by Poles and the areas where elected Polish representatives were present in local government, which you can see in the map there. So thus his concept of the Polish sphere of influences attributed an importance to the legacy of political and socio-economic influences in the region, which he implied persisted despite a century and a half of Russian rule. To be an ethnic Pole is to be part of a particular socio-economic or political class. And he offset the fact that in statistical terms, Poles only occupied a very small percentage of the population, around 3%, but argued that their socio-economic influence was more important than their numerical presence. If land was owned by a Polish landlord or had a Polish representative in local government, the inhabitants of the estate or parish were all classified as Polish. Similarly, he also classified all the territories which he defined as having Polish high culture. He mapped the density of Polish schools and also the location of Polish language printing presses. As a result, the majority of Polish Livonia was rendered as part of a long corridor of Polishness which stretched northward of Vilnius, Vilna, to Zvinsk and up to the present-day border with Estonia. Thus, by changing the parameters for defining Polishness, Roma's atlas reappropriated former Polish Livonia into the imagined geography of Poland. Another important factor which led to the rediscovery of Polish Livonia was Catholicism. And cartographers during this period built on the long-held association in the Russian Empire, in this region, of Catholicism as the Polish faith. One of the most vocal proponents of this idea was Wawel, who was an economist and statistician. However, despite this, he was quite skeptical of the fact that statistical data could adequately capture the feeling of being Polish. And he argued that the true measure of Polishness could not be based on arbitrary thresholds of quantitative data, such as 50% of the population, but instead it could only be measured according to the supremacy of Polish culture, based on a combination of factors, of which he thought religion was one of the most important. And in particular, he regarded Catholicism as the strongest symbol of Polishness, as he described it, which meant that in Polish Inflanti, the Belarusian and Latvian Latgalian speakers who professed Catholicism were incorporated into his vision of Poland. Roman similarly produced maps mapping the distribution of the Catholic faith, and also the location of different churches, which then based on the parish boundaries of where these churches were located, used this to also map the boundaries of what he just would call ecclesiastical Polishness. As you'll notice, language didn't play the main factor during this period. Roman did mention the question of language, and he wrote that without a doubt, language is one of the principal markers of nationality. However, he believed that that language alone couldn't be reliably used by geographers and cartographers as a way of determining the borders of Polishness. And this was because, as he wrote, in Western White and Little Russia, the people there speak vulgar language, and in most cases they have never heard of White or Small Russians, and they can be counted as Poles as they are Catholics. The dismissal of language as a principle for defining the inhabitants in space of a future colony changed with the end of the war in November 1918 and the start of the Paris Peace Conference in January 1919. In his famous 14-point speech in early 1918, Woodrow Wilson placed national self-determination on the table as the principle for future peace negotiations, and stressed that it would be vital to create a strong Polish state and to maintain a balance of power in Central Europe. The concept of national self-determination was notoriously vague in practice for the like Roman Dmowski and Ignacy Paderewski. And they lobbied for a Poland founded on ethnically Polish and Catholic demos, as opposed to Joseph Pilsudski's and the Polish Socialist Party planned to create a multi-ethnic Polish state. For Roma, the pre-1772 borders lost some of their difficult and inviolable status, as he was only interested in claiming the territory defined as ethnically Polish, or, and this is important, potentially Polish, which roughly corresponded to the 1793 border of the Commonwealth. By 1919, the prerogative of the state frontiers should concur with ethno-linguistic common national boundaries, supplanted earlier arguments about the historical, socio-economic, cultural and religious boundaries of Poland. Roman was brought in by the Polish delegation to act as an expert advisor and prepared many documents and maps for the Polish delegation. What is interesting, though, is although ethno-linguistic principles were kind of elevated as being the primary factor for drawing boundaries, Dmowski and Rommel worked together to map those areas which were not only defined as being ethno-linguistically Polish, but also those areas where the local population could easily be assimilated Poles or with Poles, but as they saw, simply didn't know it. The way in which ethno-linguistic factors were combined with other variables during this period can clearly be seen in the maps that Rommel produced for the Polish delegation. For example, he produced this map which showed the distribution of participants in the 1863-4 uprising in the Russian Empire, which defined Polish in terms of a commitment to political ideas of Poland, as well as maps showing the various institutional markers of Polish, such as Polish language schools, museums, and libraries. As a result, the two cities of Dinenberg and Łódź were claimed by Poland. Finally, in the period between 1919 and 1920, the way that ethno-linguistic factors became even more important in the demarcation of borders can be clearly seen in the case of Iluz, which was a small municipality in the south of former Polish Poland, which was claimed by both Poland, Latvia, and Lithuania during the chaos which was going on in these years, where this region was the kind of crossroads between the Polish-Soviet War, Russian Civil War, the Latvian-Lithuanian wars of independence, and various other conflicts which were going on in the region. In 1919, the cartographer Malazewski produced an atlas where he shaded the southern tip of this region dark red to indicate the Polish majority in the region. And by rendering this region as part of a core ethno-linguistically Polish territory, he was making a strong statement at the time about the need for Poland to extend its borders north of the River Dwina. However, if we look at maps produced a year later in 1920 and 1921, we see that Polish claims to this region have disappeared. They're no longer on the map. So on the left we have a map he produced in which he you can see there's a blue line going around in that, which he describes which he uses to denote the borders of Latvia. So there's no suggestion that it should be part of Poland. And similarly, in the second edition of his atlas, which I also began my presentation with, you can see that almost all of Atlantic, the Poles have disappeared. So this paper has highlighted some of the ways in which ethnographic maps were used by Polish intellectuals in the early 20th century to map out different definitions of what they understood to be Poland and Poles. Polish Livonia, which had been forgotten in the 19th century, became the epitome of the eastern borderlands as a kind of tabula rasa onto which multiple phantom borders of Polishness, whether they be historical, political, socio-economic, cultural, religious, and then finally ethno-linguistic, could be projected. I would like to end by sharing just two short reflections on the ways in which the concept of phantom borders has helped me think about my research in new ways. Firstly, while demographic cartography emerged as an important medium through which to articulate different territorial claims, These maps represent another kind of phantom. Relying on Russian imperial statistical data from the period prior to the war, often from the 1890s, they conveyed a sense of status, immobility, and unchanging patterns of habitation. These maps were thus anachronistic from the day they were printed. They mapped ghostly and bygone spaces and borders which were completely at odds with the demographic turmoil which was taking place in the region, brought about by the mobilization and movement of troops, forced displacement, refugeedom, civilian casualties, and disease, etc. Secondly, by paying attention to the claims made by Polish intellectuals on Polish Livonia in the early 20th century, I am trying to make a historiographical intervention into the study of a border which, in my opinion, has been woefully neglected in the literature and current research. Research on the eastern borders of the former Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth of the Kresy has almost exclusively focused on the territories of present-day Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine. This is true of American historians such as Timothy Snyder or Steven Seagal in his book on cartography in this region, of the Polish historian of cartography, Piotr Eberhard, and also in German historiography, as exemplified by the recent book by the German historian Alexander Steger on the Polish Ostpolitik. And Latvia isn't mentioned in any of these works. There's research on the establishment of Poland's northern border after World War I. Instead, it's overwhelmingly concentrated on the Vilnius question. That Poland and Latvia shared a border during the interwar period is a blind spot in the region's historiography. This paper thus conjures up the ghost of Polish Livonia as a point of intersection between Polish and Latvian historiography and reasserts the Latvian question into the wider historiography